So how did I build this cool Art Deco overpass for my HO scale layout? Well, I'm about to show you right now on the main track. Hey everyone, my name is Mike. Welcome back to the main track. It's great to have you along with us today. During my recent layout video tours, I've received a lot of questions and comments about one feature in particular, and that's my Art Deco overpass that carries the Katy Railroad tracks over US Highway 50. Now, bridges are one of my favorite scenery elements, and this is one I definitely had to have on my layout to set the scene just right. Now, the real thing, or at least parts of it, are in Sedalia, Missouri, and it carried the Katy tracks, as I mentioned, over the lanes of Highway 50 or Broadway Boulevard. Now, when I was a kid, I remember going under this bridge with the Katy trains passing overhead, so I've got a lot of cool memories of it. Plus, it was a pretty recognizable feature of the MKT's infrastructure here in Sedalia. So, as you can imagine, it was pretty important to get that overpass here on the layout. Now, it's not an exact replica. I call it close enough modeling. Because of my spacing limitations, I had to condense some things and cut out some particular elements, but what I did is I made it as close as possible so when you see the feature, you know exactly what it is and where it is. Let's take a look at how I did that. Now, rewinding just a little bit, I actually constructed this bridge a couple of years ago before I started model railroading here on the YouTube channel. So with that in mind, I don't have any footage of the construction process itself, but I did take several photographs along the way, just kind of documenting my progress, so I'm glad I did that. I'm going to piece together those photos with some videos of the current bridge, hopefully able to tell the story of exactly how I built the bridge. Now, this ended up being a pretty in-depth kit bashing process. There weren't any kits out there in the market that fit the bridge exactly that I needed, so I was going to have to cut and paste and saw and glue and pretty much build my own. Thankfully, there were some kits that were very similar, and I was able to use those as the base. Well, the materials I used were 2 Walthers Art Deco Highway Underpass kits, 2 Micro Engineering Deck Girder Bridge kits, and 2 Rick's Products Highway Roadway kits. Now, you may recall I kind of touched on this overpass a little bit in some of my previous videos. It's an Art Deco style overpass over US Highway 50 or Broadway Boulevard in Sedalia, Missouri. Now, you can see here it's a pretty big setup. 2 side-by-side plate girder spans with concrete sides and a pedestrian tunnel. The spans across here carried 2 different railroads. The easternmost carried the 2 tracks for Katy's main line to St. Louis, which is the subject of my layout. Now, the westernmost span carried a single Missouri Pacific line. It was originally a branch line south to Warsaw, Missouri. Now, right here we see a pretty cool picture of the very last Mopac train to Warsaw in 1946 steaming across the bridge. And now we fast forward just a handful of years to 1951, and you can see railroading has changed pretty quickly since that last picture in 1946. Here we see a Katy Baldwin diesel pulling a freight northward across the Highway 50 bridge. Now, you'll notice in both the 1946 and 1951 pictures here that the spans are painted silver. That was the original color of the metal, but over the years that paint chipped, everything rusted to give us that brown look that the spans had by the time the 1980s rolled around. The Missouri Pacific track through here was used for industrial switching up through the 1970s, but the rails were gone by the early 80s, leaving this span empty, which is how it would have been during the time frame I'm modeling, which is right around 1986 to 1987. Now, the former Katy trackage across the bridge lasted until the late 1990s, and it now carries the Katy Trail State Park hiking and biking trail. I took the 2-hour trip up to Sedalia to take some pictures of the bridge when I was starting the project. As you can see from these photos, things look a little different these days. In 2016, the steel girder spans themselves carrying the rail lines were taken out and replaced with this pedestrian span. Well, they did leave all the abutments and retaining walls in place. You can clearly see the bridge shoes that supported each of the 2 spans here. As you can imagine, a lot of the rail fans and history buffs were pretty upset to see this alteration, but the city and the state of Missouri wanted to provide better clearances for traffic down below. So nowadays things look quite a bit different, but it's pretty neat they left the remainder of the bridge standing. We're probably lucky the spans lasted as long as they did, some 20 years after the last train rolled across. Now, starting off with the Walthers kit, I combined 2 Art Deco bridge kits to form the side structure with the abutments, pedestrian tunnel, and the sidewalks. I had to modify it pretty heavily to get the right look. Well, first up, I wanted to show you exactly what everything looks like when you build the kit as it comes with the instructions from Walthers. Now, these are some remnants of one of those bridges I built for a Santa Fe layout I had several years ago. Now compare that to my modified Katy bridge and you get an idea of the reconfiguring I had to do. I filled in the concrete architectural features with some putty since the real bridge didn't have that, it was simply flat concrete. I also cut down the tower type portions to bring the height down to where it needs to be. Now, I did not use the girders that came with the Walthers bridge. They were too short and not tall enough for what I needed. You can see the real girders had a pretty beefy look to them. The ones that come with the Walthers kit were a little on the small side. So this is where I used the micro engineering girders. Now, the micro engineering kit came with an open deck, so I had to make a solid deck with styrene to match the ballasted style for the prototype. For the highway down below, I used Rick's Products highway road pieces. This is what I use for all of the streets here on my layout. If you've used these before, you know they're more of a jointed concrete type of roadway surface. For the metal side railing, I simply modified some Rick's Products wrought iron highway overpass railings. And for the concrete railings, I modified Rick's Products early highway overpass railings. Now rewinding even more, here's a shot showing how I constructed the bench work ahead of time with a lower section to hold the highway and bridge. Once the bridge was done, I glued it to the surface here of this lower portion of the bench work, and then I went in to construct the fill leading up to the structure. Now for this, I used a lot of wall plaster to get the exact contour. Now the kind I prefer to use is DAP Dry Dex. It goes on pink, as you can see right here, but it turns to white when it's dry, so you know when you're good to start sanding it down and painting for scenery. And now fast forward a few months, and here is the finished bridge. My hefty little Katy overpass does a good job carrying my trains passing over the highway and definitely helps set the scene here in Sedalia. As you can see, I've still got a few touch-ups left to do, maybe a little more weathering and of course some scenery, but I'm really impressed with how the scene has turned out so far. And there you have it, my US 50 overpass for my HO scale Sedalia subdivision layout. Now the project ended up being a lot more in depth than I thought it would be going into it. As you can see what I had to do right there to that to get the right look, but in the end I'm pleased with the results and I think it was well worth it. We've got some more exciting projects in the works for you here on the layout. We'll look forward to bringing those to you in future episodes here on the main track. Until next time, all aboard and all the best.